word of mouth is actually one of our strongest sources of acquisition. We found that customers didn't have any issues sharing with a lot of excitement, like the Tekla experience with their friends and family. We have some really exciting years ahead of us. Thanks for asking. It's going to be so much fun. And retail is sort of one of the North Stars for us in the next 3, 5, 10 years. US is our biggest direct-to-consumer market, and even though there's a guy who wants to challenge that every now and then with the tariff introduction or some sort, it keeps being very strong. We want to double down on what has worked really well for us already, which is sort of being super consistent in how we interact and what we offer our customers, and sort of in terms of experience, service, and obviously product. Staying authentic, staying relevant, that's like some of the absolutely most important things. You don't stick in your nose in where you don't belong, and we like try to be true to who you are as a brand and as a business, and as you say, like make sure you're relevant to the customer.
Hello and welcome to Let's Talk Loyalty and Loyalty TV, a show for loyalty marketing professionals. I'm Paula Thomas, the founder and CEO of Let's Talk Loyalty and Loyalty TV, where we feature insightful conversations with loyalty professionals from the world's leading brands. Today's episode is hosted by Nyeleti Nkuna, a global customer loyalty strategist with a background in advertising, television, and consulting. With experience in blue-chip global brands, she drives engagement, champions inclusivity, and energizes customers and audiences worldwide. Enjoy.
How do you cultivate loyalty in a home and lifestyle brand? My name is Nyeleti Nkuna, and in this episode of Let's Talk Loyalty and Loyalty TV, I'll be joined by Kristoffer Windall Juhl, the Managing Director and CEO of Tekla Fabrics. Designed in Copenhagen, produced in Europe, and sold to more than 60 countries around the world, Tekla brings modernity and freedom of expression into the textile industry. In my conversation with Chris, we unlock how Tekla has built a strong and loyal customer base in a relatively short space of time, from their product design to creating rich customer experiences and tapping into key cultural moments. Tekla proves that loyalty is a long game and that every moment of engagement, from the digital storytelling into the retail experience, is an opportunity to delight customers, keep them coming back for more, and to cultivate loyalty. Enjoy. Chris, welcome to Let's Talk Loyalty. It is so exciting to have you on the show. I've been looking forward to talking to you and getting to know more about Tekla and your loyalty journey. Welcome.
Thanks, Lisa. Thanks for having me and giving both me and Tekla this opportunity to discuss loyalty. I look very much forward to it.
And as we always kickstart this show, we like to get a bit of insights about you as a leader and as a person. And the first question that we always ask our guests is, what is the book that you would recommend that has shaped you as a leader, as a person, that gives us an indication of who you are?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I mean, I'm going to disappoint you in saying that books has been a scarce sort of, it hasn't really been a source of inspiration of mine for the past 2 years after becoming a dad. So I've been more on the path of podcast, which I'm very excited about now that time is sort of limited, and you need to fill out your commute or whatever. So a few worth mentioning that I always listen to is sort of the Acquired Guys, that does amazing job in breaking down beautiful brands and businesses that's done well. Is like a great source of inspiration for how to build something that that what we aspire to do other companies has done before, or the brands has done before, and that's a great way to get inspired. And then for my personal development, I like a podcast such as The Knowledge Project. It's the interview. I find honestly it's no sort of specific theme in there, but like there's just people expertise coming in from left and right, and I find that incredibly exciting. Whether it's entrepreneurs or expert people within a certain domain, it's great for sort of how I shape up my day-to-day life here as a CEO at Tekla.
I mean, you touched on the right points, right? There's so many things to juggle these days, and to consume content on the go is probably what most people are doing today. And so Acquire, and the second one was?
The Knowledge Project.
the Knowledge Project. We'll make sure that we link both podcasts on this
Thank
show.
you. Sounds
And so
good.
now getting to know about Tekla, it's a relatively young brand, and I'm very
Mhm.
inspired by a story. But in fact, you are really reimagining bedding and sheets and towels in a different kind of way. And one would say that you are entering people's most private spaces in their homes. So if you could tell us a little bit about the brand and your journey thus far.
No, definitely. I think you're absolutely right. What we do is all about comfort and you're within your personal space, and I think that the way we've disrupted the category is essentially made people prioritize it once again. I think when we started 7 years ago, it was a little bit a category of products that was sort of forgotten to catch dust on a shelf, essentially. And I think that within Europe, it was very much dominated by these legacy players who didn't sort of speak to the customers in a very nuanced way. And we believed we had an idea what the modern consumer sort of expected of a brand and such a product, and we tried to put all of that into Tekla. I mean, our sort of uncompromised approach to how we develop product, quality, function, but also the design, which I would say some would sort of label as timeless to an extent or minimal. And then, of course, how we tell stories, how we do branding, essentially. It's when we started Tekla, I think a lot of people didn't understand why we thought bedding or towels or textiles within the home was exciting. But I mean, it was very much developed from our own needs, having traveled the world, having lived many different places. It was very clear it was hard to find consistent sort of quality. And when you build a home, textiles plays an important role in delivering that comfort. And we thought there was an opportunity to do that a little bit differently. And then, we saw that we could build a brand. My dear colleague and partner in Tekla, Charlie, is an amazing sort of brand guy. And the way he can sort of tell stories and the way he can build bridges into culture to create desire and relevancy of a category that was a little bit gone and forgotten has been incredible. And I think that we saw a massive trend building that the more conscious consumer started to buy quality instead of quantity. So this was also a product category where you had a lot of people waiting for a brand to offer that right sort of balance between quality and price. And I think we nailed that to some extent. And yeah.
Yeah, and you speak about the quality, but also earlier, the Scandi minimalism that you brought into it. And I know there's a lot of different cultural fusions that you have experimented with along the way. And I'll go into partnerships a bit later. But looking at, Tekla as a brand, everything that you've just said, and the desire and relevancy that you inspire, who is the Tekla customer? And can you walk us through the typical customer journey in terms of when do they first discover you and how do they end up becoming loyal customers?
Yeah, I think a few years into our journey, with the first time we started, I mean, we also need to have a critical mass in order to start speaking to your customer and understanding how they come about, how they find you, how they engage with you, how they interact with you. And the first time we did a proper sort of anthropological approach to that, tried to understand, like we had focus groups, we spoke to customers, we did sort of surveys, we really tried to sort of build a very good picture of who our customer are and how we can provide meaningful experiences and products to them. We found that obviously there's a great deal of our customers who comes across us on the different platforms of today, where you go for inspiration or to just waste time, I guess, to some extent. But we have a very strong aesthetics. We have a very clear visual sort of expression, campaigns, imagery, everything we do. We are put so much work effort into. So I think that a lot of people are captivated by the brand, and whether they come across that on Instagram, Pinterest, on any of these platforms, that's a sort of that's for majority like entry point. Then we were surprised when speaking to our customers in the first survey, which we now run biannually, essentially, that word of mouth is actually one of our strongest sources of acquisition. We found that customers didn't have any issues sharing with a lot of excitement, like the Tekla experience with their friends and family. And it was quite wonderful to see, because I think that it's different with fashion, for example, when if you buy a favorite dress of yours, you wouldn't share it with your friends because you don't all want to show up in the same
Right.
thing. Yeah, exactly. And I think for us, it was very different that people found an amazing product. They might have been captivated by the brand, but then they come in, they decide to buy, we deliver, and they love the products, the way they look, the way they feel, the way they function. And all of a sudden, you're like, if I have amazing towels, and I know my mom has been talking about towels forever, like why don't I share that with her? So we saw word of mouth is actually one of our strongest channels of acquisition, and one of the I think I think it was the biggest share of sort of how we came interacted with a customer the first time. So that was quite exciting. Um, yeah, and then I think you just have to build on that essentially. And yeah, I hope that answered your question.
Absolutely. And that referral piece, right? So it's not
Yeah,
just about delighting the customer, but they are so satisfied that they're willing to, tell their mom and their friend. So, it brings me to the work of Fred Reichelt, who's the father of loyalty, in my opinion. And he really talks about, doing good onto the customer so much that they
yeah.
would want to actually spread the word forward. So I definitely think that referral as well as retention are definitely strong markers of a loyal customer.
No, I couldn't agree more. And I think that when at the end of the day, when you're a consumer brand like we are, and we not only are we consumer brand, we also sell a product that customers interact with on a daily basis. Like for some people, they spend half their life in Tekla. They sleep in it and they wear it when they chill at home and they take showers and so forth. So it's obviously we very much sort of we have a big role to play within the home of these people. So there's no way we can disappoint on product. Then we've lost them instantly. So I think for us it's been foundational since the beginning to really approach product with no compromise, like to the extent possible. I mean, then over time, it's an evergreen focus of ours to constantly do better. But I think most of our customers, what they will say is that we kind of underpromise and over-deliver on product, and that's a key driver of loyalty, retention, and referral, as you say, because it's and I mean, and it's going to sound a little stupid, but I cannot believe how many brands neglect that very
Yeah.
sort of simple, to some extent, quote unquote, exercise that it is to just do great products. It's harder than you think. Then it's obviously a benefit that we don't have to do new products every 3 months to stay relevant to the customers. We can double down on core products, staple goods for the homes that are elevated. So in that sense, a playing ground is set up nicely for that, but it's harder than you think, and it's I think it's one of the most important drivers of where we are today.
And I'd like to just like double click on that, the promise of quality, and you've just said it, right? You under promise and over deliver. How has that been such a core of what Tekla is? Because people talk about the quality, the craftsmanship, and you are targeting an audience that I would seem are quite conscious in terms of, the sustainability part of it. And this is also could be very much put into the wellness brand. As you said, people are spending most of their days in Tekla. So
Yeah.
talk to me a little bit about, the quality of the product and all of these different markers that make people think that this is worth paying a premium price for.
Yeah. I think it's not rocket science like that. That's the first thing I want to say, but it's a lot of hard work essentially.
Mhm.
And I think when we work with some of like all of our partners. Most of our stuff is produced in Europe, most of it in Portugal. They have great craftsmanship. They do beautiful products, and I'm very proud to say that all of our main suppliers of today have been partners of Tekla since the early days. And a lot of the work when it comes to quality, function, finishing, and design, essentially, or making at least, is done with them. And we've been on a journey together. I mean, when we came to them and we put forward our requirements, our idea of a good product, I mean, it took some time, and we had to be very persistent and very sort of demanding over the course of I would say, like initial 3 to 4 years of our journey with them to really make sure they understood the importance of these things. Because just as with fast fashion, they had also gone through these sort of vicious cycles of newness, and the products, and a lot of their customers came to them wanting to develop new products all the time. Whereas we did it very differently. We said to them, let's develop the best quality we can within this sort of price, and then let's make sure that a beautiful product comes out of that, and then that we create a partnership where we constantly challenge ourselves, like each of us, to do better. Like so, if it's about adding a stitch, improving
Yeah.
like implementing a detail, the way we brand it, like the way we dye it, like so it lasts longer, the durability, like we care about everything essentially. And yeah, no, sustainability and having sort of a dedicated strategy for that has of course been important, because it's essentially more about setting a certain standard that you don't want to compromise with. So our sustainability team essentially can veto any product decision, because it's so important for us that it lives up to the standard that we think the modern and more conscious consumer demands from products today, especially when it's seen as, something for your home, something so close to you, something so intimate, and something that should last long.
Absolutely. And, going from, the product itself, how it's made, and all the care that goes into the final delivery of the actual beds and sheets and towels and pajamas. But also, not to be glossed over, is that Tekla started as a digital first company. So your first, in terms of distribution channel, has been digital. So if you could take us through that journey in terms of the e-commerce, what were some of where did you see the demand, and yeah, how are people responding to this in terms of being able to buy a product before actually feeling it, because they didn't have the retail store to kind of feel a lot of that value that goes through the dedicated care you go through on the product side?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. It's tricky because there's only so much you can do with great copy and beautiful imagery. At the end of the day, one of the most important experiences you can have with our products is, of course, touching and feeling. Like the tactility of all of our products are incredibly important, and you could do your best to describe that essentially. But in that sense, it was tricky to be digital first. That's also why I think that for a lot of our customers, especially the early adopters and the people that really showed up for us in the first few years, a lot of them were sort of indulged and sort of found Tekla relevant more from our aesthetics and storytelling. They thought we did beautiful products. The branding, the attention to detail, the experience they got online, the imagery. I mean, we didn't oversell Tekla to some extent. We tried to be very honest. We tried to be very transparent with what they're getting, what we're doing, what we put into it. Try to set some kind of expectations towards the customer if they decide to commit and become a customer of Tekla. And then all of the work that goes on behind the scenes that is hard to put in great copy or even hard to capture with an image is the stuff that isn't visible to the customer until they try it. And that was obviously what, before anyone bought anything, we didn't know what they would think. But thankfully, we managed to put together, it's a very holistic exercise. It's like a lot of moving parts, but at the end of the day, an experience online that sort of converted some customers into, or some visitors into customers. And then once they got the products, they found that we delivered kind of what we promised, and perhaps even a bit more, and therefore they decide to come back essentially. So initially it was, but then speaking to the competition, as I also said earlier, initially it wasn't that hard to stand out. Like if we did all of these things right, which obviously sounds easy, it definitely wasn't. It was a lot of hard work, a lot of great people to achieve this, but that was really sort of our recipe. So be consistent across all of those touch points, stay true to who we are, what we believe in, and present that in a digital experience that is, because of some of all the things different to what they can get elsewhere. That's probably what convinced a lot of people initially. And then I think that it was sort of then also just instinctively international. Back then we were founded, we're based in Copenhagen, but the brand came across as quite international. So the beautiful thing was that the early adopters wasn't just local. It was actually people from all over that decided to give a bet on Tekla and are now still, part of the family essentially. But yeah, so that's sort of, it was challenging, but that's how I think we cracked it.
I mean, when you talk about social proof, the numbers are there. I've looked at your Instagram account and you have 434,000 followers on Instagram. I think Pinterest was just over 5,000, and for a very niche brand, in the area that you're in, these are very impressive numbers. And you see a lot of resharing in terms of a lot of the user-generated content. If you go to YouTube, you go to TikTok. So there's definitely great momentum from people who are using the brand and, sharing the experiences of the brand. When you started to see that, the engagement that's online, that's user generated, how did you then, was it a surprise, and how did you respond to it, and how did you capitalize on it?
Don't think we were surprised to some extent. I think that what we found was that there was now clearly not just a trend where people had started prioritizing the home and buying into these sort of product categories that I think that 10, 20 years ago, it was all about furniture. Like that's when people decided to make investments in their home via elevated furniture, buying designer brands, etc. I think Tekla came around when there was a need for love and sort of attention to detail and quality to come into these category of products that we do.
Yeah.
And then I think for a lot of these customers, the way they interacted with that was then pretty much saying that what used to be very private and intimate spaces is now something I'm curating. I'm actually putting my own personal touch to it, and I want to share it with people. And that's what we saw across social media, of all kinds. But it's also fun because I mean, like it's obviously very much a generational or very much one segment within our audience. I think that what's interesting with Tekla is, and it's especially visible when holiday season comes around, sort of like late Q4, leading up to Christmas, we see that we are on the wish list for teenagers, but also grandma wants to gift her husband a sort of dressing gown or like a nightgown. I mean, it's very interesting how sort of inclusive our brand has ended up being, and also how the products just appeal to so many people. And then of course we have sort of core customers within that very broad segment, but it's very beautiful to see how easy it is to relate with Tekla across all ages, essentially.
Absolutely. I've seen some of the newer imagery, and you definitely see the dynamics in terms of the profile, the audience profile that you're seeing, and that this is not just an experience for a certain age group, but it goes across generations, as you said. And a little bit on the editorial content, because I've seen the newsletter and just putting on my CRM hat to the level of personalization in terms of like, my interests would be around the pajamas and, the content that's created around there. Um, how are you personalizing the product to this growing and evolving audience that you're capturing?
I mean, we really much. I mean, we have a pretty solid sort of setup around data and what we track, what we measure, and then we obviously try to sort of personalize the experience and the journey to the greatest extent possible. And so some of the things we track, for example, is obviously depending on what your initial purchase are, depending on to what roughly half of our customers buy across categories initially. If they don't, we have a really good idea of what is the second most likely purchase for them to make. So we try to sort of put them on a journey towards that. But before we even start speaking about other products, we first and foremost try to make sure that you know how to take care of the products that is soon arriving at your door. So that whole element of care, and then followed by inspiration, and then whether that's sort of within the category you bought into or across the other rooms of the house. Like we really try to sort of tailor the experience depending on what data we have available, and what patterns we see in sort of our data at large, to provide these experiences that has a touch of personalization to them, because that's of course very important. We know that we can stand by all of our product categories, so we know that it's just a matter of time. Then we see most of our customers, even though they start with bedding, then they end up testing out terry, and then perhaps they venture into loungewear or leisure wear, as we also provide. So yeah, we try to be smart about that. And obviously with technology of today, there's so many great ways to go about that.
And of course, now you evolve from, just the e-commerce, and you have the retail experience to complement that. So what is it that you offer in store, the one-to-one, the personal experience that cannot be replicated digitally? And what are the, more surprising delights that you can also create in the one-to-one personal space?
I mean, obviously the physical interaction with the products is, but also a Tekla representative is that's the only way that can be found, right? So I think that's like the store and retail. Also, we can speak about that later. Why it's such an important part of Tekla's future is really sort of the ultimate experience and the ultimate engagement you can have with your customer and your audience. And we try to be. That's also when we went about what's retail at Tekla a few years ago when we opened the Copenhagen store. It was tricky too, because just as the category was sort of gone and forgotten, like how you bought our product was also hadn't had that sort of revolution that you've seen in other product categories. You found us, usually your textiles are found in a department store in the basement or on the top floor where no people are going, and the furniture looks like something from the 80s or 90s. So it was really about figuring out, okay, what does retail like, or what does the consumers deserve? What's missing within our category? And one of the things we decided to do in our retail experience was put service at the heart of it, essentially. So saying that you're coming into the store, interaction with a Tekla representative is everything. We want you we want to guide you through because we believe that, with the sort of variety we offer across the different categories, having the knowledge of what the different product qualities can do versus the other, what are the trade-offs, what are the benefits, all of those things is something that we don't expect anyone to sit on that knowledge themselves. So, but obviously, well-trained staff can guide you through, and that whole experience is something that customers really appreciate. It's that's what they're longing for when they go on our website. Is really that elevated service and that. Then, of course, it takes a bit more time. Clicking and buying online is a bit more effortless and a bit more smooth, but in store you get the full experience, and we see that our customers really appreciate that, and that it has a significant difference. Like the more elevated qualities sell better in store because physically, that validation that you can get from an imagery or some great copy online, you can get that in store. So that's some of the dynamics that we see.
No, 100%. I mean, of course, digital gives you the convenience and the speed, but there's nothing like a human being and who knows what you want and has the time and space to kind of take you through that journey, and in it you discover other things that you might enjoy.
Yeah, no, exactly.
And so another thing that I've seen Tekla do very well is curated experiences. And I'll talk about the 3 days of design in Copenhagen this past summer, where you introduced the modern romance. So talk us about exhibitions like that. I see it as a mechanic that you use to engage with your customers. What goes into that, and what is the business objective of such an exhibition?
So just to provide quick context on 3 days of design, it's a fair taking place in Copenhagen where design brands, furniture design, also some fashion brands are tapping into it now, can sort of invite the public, but also obviously the industry and professionals around it to show the latest and the greatest of what they're offering. And I think that for us this year, it was really important to offer something that wasn't really part of 3 days design as we saw it. I think that 3 days of design had become a bit hectic in a good way. Also, if you come for the line sheets, for the the new collections to be to have sort of very great conversations with sales reps, etc., like that, then it definitely serves the purpose. But for us, it was more important to say, let's have a moment here where we invite people in for an experience. There's a product as part of the experience. It's a product we put so much work into over the last 2 years that we wanted to show the public. But essentially, we didn't want to add any commercial expectations to it. So therefore, our way about it was to just focus on the experience, and my team and everyone involved I think they did such a great job. It was some of the best execution we've done, and the whole experience provided then a space to breathe for the people coming to 3 days design. They could go in. They didn't have like the latest catalog chucked down their throat. It was like just a beautiful immersive experience with like a lot of space to breathe and a great soundtrack and elevated products and just a very beautiful experience that had a very clear and distinct sort of message, which was sort of this modern romance, this idea that that ever since we started Tekla, we've always been inspired by how textiles were done back in the day when you put a lot of effort into the details, and that's sort of how this Broderie Anglais collection that we labeled as modern romance during 3D design, how that came to be. And yeah, no, it sort of felt like everything just came together for us in that exhibition, and it provided something that wasn't otherwise at 3 days, and I'm very proud of the team and what we achieved. And then the funny thing is that when you do something like that with such a distinct objective of like trying to speak to the brand at its utmost finest, you end up actually also seeing that it has some really cool commercial outcomes following that as well. So it's been very exciting to see how then the collection afterwards has just been performing incredibly well, whereas that was not our initial ambition, essentially. So yeah, so it's wonderful to see somehow sometimes when you decide to be very clear and very specific in your message and try to weave that into every single touch point and every single detail, it actually works. And it has a much bigger impact than when you try to cluster the message.
I agree. And I think it's finding that trade-off, right, between brand engagement and the, immersive experience, as you've said, versus the commercial outputs of like, how much are we selling, what are the buying patterns that we are seeing through that. And sometimes you do have to invest a little bit more on the engagement over a long time to kind of see the commercial lift as people get to know the brand, understand the brand, and just bring more people into it and enjoy it.
Absolutely, absolutely, and it's a tricky thing because you're all constantly motivated to to attach both creative and commercial expectations to everything you do, but sometimes it's just beautiful to let a more creative and brand moment be that and only that, and then as you say, then it has effects that are harder to measure, but over time, and if done well, and if done, if you can surprise and delight, if it's something that just, I think 3 days of design for us was obviously very much breaking out of our comfort zone. I mean, if you look at textiles that Tekla has done, introduced to the world up until 3D's design, it was very minimal and very tight and sort of sharp in its design language. And then all of a sudden, we're introducing something with a lot of detail and a lot of romance to it, which for people was a surprise. But then when they had digested it, I think it made so much sense. And so much the right time for that right now also. So it was a very beautiful moment. And I totally agree with you.
And you also told me previously that, even in war, in times of war, right, romance still remains. And there was a story around, maybe you can share that in terms of the
Yeah.
origin you came through to the modern romance.
It was a friend of mine who visited from Finland, a dear friend of mine who is with Artec, who is also a partner of us that we've done a few projects with in the past. And he was like, "Hey, this is so right. This is so, I mean, I don't want to be, I don't want to draw any horrible sort of comparisons here, but just there's apparently a trend over time that when the world is a bit mad, as it certainly is now, people are drawn to romance. I think it's the same way that people are drawn to comfort at home, which is Tekla, right? I think that, romance becomes more important because it's the contrast to everything else that's going on. And I think that, he was like, this is so brilliant now with how mad everything is. You touching upon romance is so right. And I was like, I mean, there's no way I can take credit for that, and there's no way that was intentional. But obviously, a very fun, if it's right, like a very fun fact, and maybe that's part of why it was sort of embraced so well.
I could imagine because it's so universal and everybody can relate to that.
Yeah,
And I also just loved the blend of something that is very classic to something that is very new. And so well done on that. I thought it was an amazing exhibition.
thank you. I appreciate it.
And then maybe from exhibitions to partnerships, you already have Stussy as a stable, but you also explore different cultural moments. And I can talk about, the Japanese label, Orali, and I know I understand that has to do with some of the bathing rituals. So, what are some of the factors that go into choices like that? Which cultural moments do we tap in, and how do we honor who Tekla is, a very Scandinavian brand, but still experimenting with these other regions?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. I think that whole sort of like cultural cross-border like sort of relevance is a really tricky thing to navigate, and that's why collaborations can sometimes be a very wonderful thing because like we would never want to go into Japan, for example, as you touched upon, and do something there that we found appropriate. It's I think that so working with our Lee, who has all the integrity we need to tell a story around bathing culture in Japan, bathing culture being like such a big part of our DNA and stories we've told throughout Finland, Scandinavia, Scotland, like from a European lens and a European point of view, but something we would never dare to touch in Japan without a local expert. I mean, thankfully, the beautiful team at RLE was that local expert, and we found, just a common ground there in the values, the way they do products. I mean, we were longtime fans already, but it was just such a beautiful moment where when they realized that we wanted to do something with Japanese bathing culture, and their founder is a massive onsen fan. It was like almost like perfect, stars has aligned, let's go. And so that's a great way to kind of tap into, like, continue to add depth to that sort of cultural sort of engagement we have around bathing culture, but in an area of the world where we would never feel comfortable doing it without having a partner on board. So a really good example of what role collaborations can play in that sense. And then I would say collaborations in general and these type of partnerships is. I think Tekla has done a great variety of them. I think what they all have in common, whether it's with brands, architects, talent, foundations, because a lot of the great architects that we look up to is no longer around. Like, I mean, what they all have in common is that they are iconic in their own world, I would say. I mean, Stussy, as you touch upon, is very much an iconic brand for us. It's been around for nearly 50 years. They're still around. They're still doing well. That's a testament, on its own. And the fact that when we joined forces with them, it was an opportunity to connect with some of their early audience, like 30, 40 years earlier, who now had families and homes to look for. All of a sudden, they could engage with Stussy in a new, meaningful way. That was a beautiful moment. And then when we do these collaborations with Artec, Le Corbusier, John Pawson, like these more sort of, direct sources of inspiration, I would say, or references for Tekla, that's also wonderful because this means just as much to us. And it's not always sort of the novelty or the coolness that's important. It's also the integrity and the history and the legacy that some of these collaborations can bring in, and allowing for Tekla to sort of reinterpret.
And now in terms of just like the way Tekla is structured today, I mean, there's yourself, Chris, you're the MD slash CEO, and you earlier mentioned your partner, Charlie, who's more into the creative direction. Does the team as it is, and in the early infancy, one would say that you are in, allow for a lot of experimentation without a lot of red tape? Like, what are some of the conversations that happens between you and your partner and your team when you have all of these opportunities? And what do you say no to? What are the principles that you abide by?
Oh, that is a really good question. I think that I think that we try to be very specific about where we allow for experimentation, and we also try to be, at least on the sort of the more creative side of the business, to be very much guided by Charlie, our creative director and founder. I think at the size we are, it's also great to have some confidence top down from a person who really has a clear idea of what he thinks Tekla is, because I don't think that neither Charlie or myself can expect anyone at the company to have the same sense of urgency and care towards what Tekla is now and what we want Tekla to be. So for certain decisions, it's just always great to have sort of that final say come from either him or me. But sort of, we've also realized that now going from 2 to 50 people, it's impossible to be in on everything. So we've also had to build a company and an organization and a culture that allows for a great deal of autonomy. And it comes with, I mean, it requires a certain amount of patience because people need to build that confidence. And when they come into a brand like Tekla, where everything is incredibly tight, I think we know what we want, we know what we don't want, then it's all about asking questions, building that confidence, building that experience that over time you'll be trusted as a decision maker too. And I think we've achieved that by now. Otherwise, it would be impossible to scale. Then we would be massive bottlenecks, right, within the organization. So, yeah, no, it is tricky because it's good still to have some kind of top-down guidance and clarity. And I would say, whereas in 5 years ago, it meant that we were in on every single decision. Now it means more that we set the direction. We paint the picture of the vision and the aspirations we have for the company. And then we now have an organization of amazing people who are more than comfortable making decisions and if in doubt, obviously we're very much here and available to make sure we stay on the right track.
That's a great marker of growth. And then just looking a little bit outside, looking at the trends within the home and lifestyle category, what are some of the things that, Chris, you have seen that either inspires you or challenges you in the way you think about Tekla's future?
I think it's very obvious now that brand is more important than anything. Especially, I mean, now obviously I'm not speaking on behalf of any industry, but like the industry we were in, sort of premium consumer goods, it's very obvious that in the extremely turbulent, maybe 5-6 years we've been through since sort of the pre-pandemic up until now, the businesses that prevail, that are still here, that are still showing up and still delivering and still performing, is where the brand is the strongest. And I think that's both really reassuring to know because to conclude, because we invest a lot in brands. So it's obviously nice to know that is money well spent and will continue to do so. I think that sort of we work with the notion that the brand is bigger than the business, and we would actually like to keep it that way. So it means that there's constantly sort of demand being underserved and there's opportunity for growth, and that's just a fun place to be rather than the other way around. So continuing to invest in the brand is one of the most important things, but it's also one of the biggest challenges, because what is right and wrong there, no one knows, right? And I think that is sort of, that's where we have, not all coming down to one person, because now thankfully it's several teams sort of feeding into that. But obviously we still very much trust Charlie and his guidance on what Tekla as a brand is and needs to become. And then, we try to take these ideas that we have for how we evolve the brand, and we just go about it with, extreme attention to detail. We try not to cut corners. We don't want to compromise. And yeah. And then I think we can continue to have that asymmetry, that the brand leads the business, the brand drives the business. That's really important to us. But it is a bit frightening, because at the end of the day, the consumer decides whether you are succeeding with that or not, whether the brand is relevant, whether the brand sort of speaks to their emotions, whether they want to invest. That's all up to them. Obviously, we believe we have some sort of a recipe for success now. We believe that what we're doing, we can see that it works and will continue. So we sort of have an opportunity to just double down and do more and do better. As the business grows, more resources will be available. We can invest even more. But yeah, so to answer your question, it's brand is everything these days, I think, and that's both very reassuring when you're a brand-led business, but also incredibly frightening, because it's also the most intangible part of building what we're building, essentially.
Brand is key. No, I love that. And talking about consumer interest, and I'm curious, like as we wrap up this episode, where you're seeing demand, to kind of just give context to the question, I've been to the flagship store in Copenhagen. It's amazing, and I can definitely agree to everything that you said earlier about the personal experience. I also know that as we talk, the team are getting ready to open up in London soon. So.
Yes.
What are you seeing in terms of expansion opportunities for Tekla? So what comes after London? Is it New York? Is it Zurich? Is it Johannesburg? What's in the pipeline?
No, I mean, we have some really exciting years ahead of us. Thanks for asking. It's going to be so much fun. And I think retail is sort of one of the North Stars for us in the next 3, 5, 10 years, maybe even. It's working within our industry and within our category. It's hard to find distribution, essentially, meaning that it's almost inevitable that retail is going to be a cornerstone of the business. But it's also an exercise that we've been a bit careful about, because we wanted to make sure we had some sort of idea of what good looks like. And I think we have that now with the Copenhagen store and the way it's performing. It's incredible. And obviously it will be a very different challenge in a city like London, which you as you touched upon is up next later this year, because it's just different dynamics, different sort of power within that audience, different opportunities also. So it's and also a much bigger bet, essentially. So very excited about that. But no, I mean, I'm very happy to say that sort of 7 years into it, we are a global brand. So we see our opportunities to expand retail even further coming from more or less all corners of the world, which is very exciting. So like US is our biggest direct-to-consumer market, and even though there's a guy who wants to challenge that every now and then with the tariff introduction or something, it keeps being very strong. So a goal of ours is definitely to look to expand there next year. We just hired our first guy in New York. It's very exciting. We're sort of trying to build a foundation there for retail entry, inevitable. We are working with great partners both in America and Asia and across Europe that helps present the product to the consumer, like traditional wholesale partnerships, department stores, etc. But there's just so few of them that it'll be a strong and important part of our sort of omni-channel setup going forward, but it won't be the exponential sort of growth that might have historically been the case for a lot of fashion brands at first, before then they take direct-to-consumer part seriously later on. For us, it's been a little bit the other way around, and then also with that sort of constraint on the wholesale as a business, again, not neglecting the importance of it. It's still incredibly important, especially in Asia, for example. But then, there's just a massive opportunity within retail. And then you have this, if done well, you have this sort of the best way to present the brand is retail. So, you have this brand vehicle that can have amazing halo effects on the other channels of your business if done well. It's also something that, there's a natural cadence to how many stores we can open. So, I mean, there's one more this year. It's been a long time in the making. Very happy about that. But then we expect the next coming years a couple of store openings or more every year. New York is on the table for next year, Seoul as well. We see great support in Japan and Korea, and we're very excited about developing those markets also. So yeah, no, it's definitely sort of the more cultural or sort of cities of significance that we're looking towards first, rather than expanding throughout Denmark or Scandinavia, because that's just where we see the demand is currently. And yeah, it's super exciting.
So demand is a factor what you look at when it comes to expansion. What are the key factors that you look into?
So we try to demand is, at least for the next few openings, we have to look at sort of how the existing businesses within that region. So we definitely look at all the data we can come across to paint some sort of picture on the readiness of the market, and whether we feel like the demand is there and to what extent we are serving that demand, or whether the brand needs more work on positioning. And so, for example, Asia, it's very obvious for us that that's an exercise about positioning first and foremost in the short run. It's really the market where you have one shot to sort of position the brand where you want it to be, and it's because of sort of how the consumers make their decisions. And so initially there, retail even will be very much a brand exercise, whereas in other markets such as London and New York, like, we don't compromise on brand, but it's also seen as a very commercial exercise where we are experiencing great demand that is simply underserved in the market. So having retail prevail is going to be such a great way for consumers to interact with us, and hopefully, be more curious about buying more from our assortments or new products that we bring to market, and so on and so forth. So it's a little bit different market to market how we make the conclusions. And in the short term, retail for us is about opening stores where we see the demand being there, and then catering to that. And then, who knows, down the road we might be opening stores to build markets also. I want that's definitely an opportunity as well.
Absolutely. And then if we just all tie it up to loyalty, right? I mean, you are having great success, and there's a lot more still to come, but not necessarily with a structured loyalty program. And given that you are within the premium element of it, I would not advise it either way. But what are the considerations around that? And, we've kind of spoken about different levers that you're using, the immersive experiences, the partnerships, the in-store, those are different, loyalty drivers that come into the fold. But talking specifically about loyalty as an objective, what would you say you want to bring forward going forward?
I think that we want to double down on what has worked really well for us already, which is sort of being super consistent in how we interact and what we offer our customers, and sort of in terms of experience, service, and obviously product. I think that you're absolutely right. We don't look for the more conventional or more, I guess, commercial tools to drive loyalty, such as schemes or points or anything of that nature. We believe that it's an act of patience. So it's a relationship built over time. It's a relationship built of meaningful interactions, and whether that is, and it's something as simple and everyday as a newsletter, or an editorial storytelling, like some stories we tell that also reach our existing audience, all the experiences we provide and offer, like whether it's the invitations to come and have tea ceremonies in the store, or experiencing a new product firsthand, or like we really try to make sure that what we offer is holistic, so that the customers feel that, even speaking to other occasions where Tekla could come across, such as gifting moments, has been a very strong driver of loyalty for us. One thing is convincing our customers to buy in the first time for their own home, for their own comfort. Then, as we also talked about, we know that they don't have a problem referring. So we also figured they probably wouldn't have an issue also gifting our products. So we've had a massive strategy over the last 3 years come together around how to position Tekla as a gifting destination for a great gift, and that has worked incredibly well also. And when you can deliver on that front, also you don't not only surprise and delight the customer that's buying Tekla for their own home, you're also surprising and delighting a relative or someone that they care about, and it's just so nice. I mean, you go from 2 to 4 eyeballs, and like more people become aware, and more people are delighted, and so it's like I think I want to speak to how we succeed with loyalty as how we've succeeded with Tekla as a whole. It's in sort of an orchestration of many things for us. It's all of these elements, all of the touch points, all of the attention we put into detail, to the products, to the way we develop things and make things, that's essentially what drives loyalty for us over time. And then of course we work with data, we look at patterns, we try to be predictive, we try to, we try to be smart as we can be, and really leverage all the technological advancements that's been upon us. But at the end of the day, I think what matters is all of the other stuff, and the fact that when orchestrating that at a right balance creates a meaningful relationship with the customer, and therefore also a loyal one, essentially.
Absolutely. I think it's finding those moments that matter for the customer and making sure that Tekla is there when it happens, and Tekla shows up as expected, and as you said earlier, under promises and over delivers.
Exactly.
And then
Staying authentic, staying relevant, that's like some of the absolutely most important things. You don't stick in your nose in where you don't belong, and like try to be true to who you are as a brand and as a business, and as you say, like make sure you're relevant to the customer. We try to really speak to that a lot within the company, that it's cool, it's okay to be cool now and then, and it's fun because it creates spikes in the data. But over time, we want to be relevant. We want to be top of mind. We want to be the brand that people think about when they think comfort at home, whether that's buying something for themselves or for their loved ones.
absolutely. I am all in for comfort. And as we wrap up, Chris, we've been talking a lot about Tekla, Tekla, Tekla. Where does this name come from? What is Tekla? And a little bit of insights into the origins of that.
So, I mean, technically, Tekla is a maiden name, so it could also have been called Sophia for that matter. But no, it's a maiden sort of Scandinavian name. And Charlie, our founder, is used to be a professional sailor. So back in his youth, I guess, yeah, sort of in his early 20s, he was sailing very competitively for the Swedish national team. And there's the thing around boats is that usually they have a name. So Tekla was one of his first boats, and sort of that name just stuck with him. And that's why we went with it. There's nothing more. That's the story essentially. It's very simple. It's very beautiful, and it's very much sort of where our roots are. So couldn't be more happy about it.
No, I love the story. And I also heard that it's a very much, you said it's a maiden name. It's a very old-fashioned
Oh yeah.
name. That's right, right.
No,
So
definitely. But I mean, like I heard a good friend of mine just had a daughter start your first year of school here in Copenhagen, and there's a Tekla in her class, and I was like, I'm not sure we play a role, but I mean, she's 6 years old, we're 8, so who knows?
I love it when, the old and new come together. A great way
Exactly.
to wrap up the show. Chris, is there anything that we have not touched upon that you would like to share, either about Tekla as a brand, or any words of wisdom that you want to leave us with?
Oh, that is a good question. No, I think we've been around it all. I think that when I got this invitation to be at the podcast, I think the main goal for me was to try to come across with an authentic message around how loyalty is sort of an exercise that takes a lot of time. It's essentially about building trust and making sure you're relevant. And when you try to sell a product, you need to also invoke some emotions. And I think that a lot of people, I think that throughout these 6, 7, 8 years we've been at the Church of Tekla, people ask me like, why does it work so well in the US? Why, how did that take off? Like, well, I think that the answer to like a lot of these questions, and also sort of zooming in on loyalty as a theme, and why it happens to work well for us, like strong retention, strong referral, all of those metrics that really is amazing to have as a baseline when you grow, is it's a sum of a lot of things. And I think that some is very tangible. Some is, like we could write playbooks on and people could copy. Other layers of that, other elements of that is incredibly intangible and super hard. And it's sort of how it all orchestrates together, and how it sort of complements each other, and overlaps. And I think that is that's why it's so tricky to build a brand, and that's also why it's so tricky to build loyalty within our segment, because it's so attached to how the brand is perceived, essentially. So that was my goal for today, to try to sort of tell our story, but make sure that at least that they understand my perspective on this, which is that it's a complex exercise, and it needs don't only need the patience of the customer, you also need to be patient yourself, and making sure you constantly believe in what you try to do. Because over the past 6-7 years of our journey, there's been constant temptations to cut corners, to do collaborations for the sake of business, to put products to market that we weren't happy with because of whatever timing, etc. So I think that, you're constantly challenged with temptations, and like one of the most important things is just to be super consistent with everything you do, and that means saying no. And we should probably have said no even more than what we've done. But it is what it is. We learn also as part of this journey, and hopefully we have a long one ahead of us.
Definitely, testing and learning is part of the journey. But I appreciate what you said. That loyalty is really an exercise that is long term. So you really need to be in it with longevity in mind, and really understanding the customer and wanting to engage and invest in building that relationship. This is something that I see Tekla doing very well. I'm very impressed by your journey. Being such a young company, but having such success. And to speak to you also at a very pivotal time when you're expanding into, physically expanding into corners of the world that you haven't been before because of the digital presence that you've had. So congratulations, and I will continue to enjoy the comfort of Tekla in my home.
Thank you, Nyeleti. Thanks so much for having me. It's been a pleasure. It was very fun. Thank you.
Likewise. Thank you.